Hello and welcome to Fine is a Four-Letter Word. My guest today is Melissa Henry, and I'm so excited to talk to her about her journey from fine to fantastic. Welcome,
Yes.
Melissa.
Hi, thanks.
Let's start with the question of what were the beliefs that were instilled in you when you were a child that may have led to your experience of fine?
That's a really good question. I always and what's funny about this question is I didn't really think about it until about like a little over 3 years ago when I quit my job. And I think where it all came from, and it was really like my parents were entrepreneurs, and they kind of struggled a little bit, and there were various reasons why, but they ended up going through bankruptcy. And what happened there was that I was kind of I was like the sixth child out of out of six kids, and they did not want me to know, like they didn't want me to learn the hard parts about life. There's always like keep it from the baby, stuff like that. But I found out about the bankruptcy.
How old were
And
you when that happened?
oh gosh, I was like mid-teens, I believe, when that
Okay.
happened. And so I think that really affected me. I didn't at the time completely understand it, but I
Yeah.
knew enough to know it was not good, and you were not supposed to talk about it, by the way. They did not talk about, not only did they not talk about stuff with me, but they didn't talk about stuff, outside of the family. Like all the family things were to remain within the family. You do not discuss it, right? So I got
Yeah.
that feeling that you don't talk about money. You don't talk about, lack of it or mistakes you've made with it or any of that stuff. And I took that, like that has was a foundational thing for me for my entire life. I still
Okay.
struggle with money issues to today, because of that
That it's
experience, I think.
shameful to talk about it, or that it's just not
Not
something that you would talk about.
not the shame of it necessarily, but like the feelings of like, oh, scarcity around it, or
Mm.
controlling it, and all of that stuff. Because I because they didn't talk about it with me, and they didn't like sit down and explain what we were going through, and that everything was going to be okay. They didn't do any of that. It was very much like an ignoring thing. I started drawing my own conclusions about it,
Uh-huh.
and then that made me feel like, well, gosh, this is a horrible thing, and I never want that to happen to me. And so I should
Mm-hmm.
always be careful, and I should, always try and make lots of money because you don't want to be without any money, and these kinds of things. And
Right.
it's just yeah, I mean, it's just funny because I spent, I think that was one of those foundational things that really shaped what I did for my entire life up till this point.
Were they really careful about money up to that point?
Well, it's weird. It's like when I look back, I was, as I said before, I was the last of six, and I was kind of one of the oops babies because my sister who was nearest to me was like 7 years older than me, so I don't think they expected me
Oh
to come
wow.
along.
Okay.
When I did, they did treat me differently than the rest, and I think, gave me more. They
Mm-hmm.
probably had more money there for a while, up till my mid-teens or whatever, so that they could do that. So I think I experienced a different childhood than the rest of them did. So it wasn't that there was always that feeling of there's not enough. I literally think that pivotal moment was what put that in my head, because I never thought about it prior to that. It wasn't like I
Okay.
was spoiled necessarily, but like I never like wanted for anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah, you
I
never
wanted
had to
like
think about it.
no. I mean, I went to private schools for like,
Yeah.
from like eighth grade and up. And that was my choice, not theirs, because I didn't like the school I was going to, and my friend was going to this other one. Can I go to the school with my friend? And they were like, yeah. And so I think the rest of
Okay.
my family was like, wow, she gets everything she wants.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that I was treated differently, but I think now I do, of course, in adulthood, having talked to my siblings about it. But So no, I don't think it's that. I just think that pivotal moment was a doozy, really.
Yeah. And then what decisions did you make as a young adult that were driven by that experience?
Oh yes. All right. So I was a creative person. Loved people. There were like a lot of paths I thought I could take, and I remember thinking, oh, maybe I want to be a psychologist, and maybe I want to, I don't know, be in marketing, or I don't know. Like I had a lot of things going into college that I thought I could do. And it's interesting because a couple things happened. One, I had, and I think this isn't really related to the bankruptcy issue or that moment, but I do think as a kid or as a young adult, I didn't have a lot of confidence in certain things or certain areas. And I thought
Yeah.
to myself, I'm not a good writer. That was the story I told myself, right? So when I got into psychology, even though it was really super interesting to me, I was like, well, I can't go down that road because in order to be successful, then I'm going to have to write a lot. I'll have to like publish in journals. I'll have to do all of that stuff. And like, no, I can't do that. And so and then I changed my major. And at that
Oh
point, I
my
was like,
gosh,
well, let
this
me,
story is so similar to mine in
is it
terms
really?
of, right, yeah, and changing my major because I didn't have the belief in myself. Somebody said something to me,
Yeah.
and I believed them more than I believed myself. So, yeah, go on.
Oh my God, we got to talk about that. Well, let's see. So what happened after that was I was like, okay, well, where can I go with this? And I thought, well, I've always loved like, advertisements and how clever they can be and all that stuff. And there's a creative element to that, right? So I was like, well, why don't I go into marketing? And then I went into marketing. And again, I told myself, I don't think I'm good enough to come up with those kinds of ideas. Like, I just sort of kept talking myself out of that. And the next
Yeah.
thing I knew, I had a friend who was I think I met her in a business fraternity at that point. And so I was talking to her and, she said, well, I'm an accountant. Like, I'm in accounting rather. And she said, well, why don't you try that out? And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm pretty good at numbers. I can do that. And that's where I stayed because there was no
Wow.
writing. I didn't have to challenge myself. And guess what? Everyone needs a bean counter. So it sort of was like ding, ding, ding in the deep, dark recesses of my mind. I'm certain that that's where, that happened. It was like, oh, okay, well, I can
Yeah.
do that.
Now you have control of the money.
Yes, control.
Well,
That's
right.
what
I
it's
mean, but
about.
based on that experience of your parents' bankruptcy, where you've kind of probably felt like they don't have control, or I don't have, there is no controlling money. Getting
Yeah,
into accounting was like, oh, here's how I can control the money.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
the funny thing is like I was never like a stellar student in accounting either. Like I was okay. I mean, I was like a B average, but like cuz I worked, I worked at it, and but like I wasn't the one that was going to all these big at the time it was big 6 accounting firms. I'm probably dating myself when I say that, but and I was interviewing for them, but I was not good enough for that. And, it was fine. I ended up, finding a job because, hey, like I said, everyone needs a bean counter. So there's always work to be found.
Sure.
Um, and so I think what's always kind of been funny is that, I decided, okay, well, I'm the creative stuff that I do. Let's just do that on the side. That'll be enough, So I definitely spent, weekends or whatever photographing, like getting out there and, I traveled a lot. So I did a lot of travel photography and things like that, but it was always just a side thing.
So you were still
And
feeding your creative needs, but
I
just doing it on
was,
the side.
yes,
Okay.
yes, for sure. For
Okay. So
sure.
you didn't
Yeah.
completely bury it like some of us
No, I
have.
didn't bury it. I didn't think there was a need for that, but like I even like I mean I swear to God, the whole time I'm thinking there's no way you make a living being a photographer. Not unless you are like really good. Like if you're like the top level, you're like, I don't even remember at the time who was like some of those photographers you think of, but you'd have to be in like fashion photography, or you'd have to be like the #1 travel photographer to ever make any money, or you'd have to have produced already a whole slew of like stock photography to be good, to making
Yeah.
money at that. So all those stories, I kept telling myself, like, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And at that time, the photography industry was so largely male. There were only like a few that would stand out, like Annie Leibovitz, who really like came out of that, and
Right. Right.
why am I forgetting her name? The one that does the flowers, the babies with the flowers, like
Oh,
Ann
yeah. I
Geddes.
know who you're talking. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Geddes,
Uh-huh.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, so for those people, I was like, okay, well, but that's because they're like unique.
Right.
There's nothing like I
They're
can't
more
do that.
special.
Yeah, for sure.
So
All
how
these
long did
stories we
you?
tell ourselves, I swear.
Oh, it's amazing how the stories that we tell ourselves and how long we believe them, for how long,
Yes.
for how many years that we
Yes.
still drag these stories around.
I
And
know.
I mean, some people can't hold on to them for their entire lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I
yeah.
think the thing is that you you kind of have to have some self-awareness. You have to make yourself look at yourself. That's the only way to really get beyond that, because if you are going to sit there and if you're going to want things to be different, the absolutely only way to do that is to look at what you've been doing and see what needs to change. But you have to be self-aware to do that. I think that's the reason why a lot of
Right.
people don't. It's either they don't have, like, they don't ever think that it's possible to change and there's literally nothing they can do,
Right.
or they don't want to look at themselves because that's too scary.
It is scary, and it could be painful
Yeah.
to or embarrassing, or just difficult
Yes.
to look at. Well, okay, this is where I am, and these are the, I don't want to say poor choices, but it's the choices that I've made that have gotten me here. And go back to that, I think it was Oprah who said that when you know better, you do better. So there's
Yes.
no reason to beat yourself up for past choices, because you did what you thought was the best thing at the time. But right, when you have to start looking back at those choices that you did make that brought you to where you are today, sometimes that doesn't feel good. A lot of times that doesn't feel good. And at the same
Yes,
time,
and
like you're saying, the only way you can get to a better place moving forward is to do that.
Yeah, and there's like, as a sidebar to that whole idea, the other thing that can be scary, and this is kind of what happens sometimes when you do that sort of inward looking, and for me, like, sort of I had my midlife crisis early, I think, and like in my 30s, I needed to get therapy because I was like totally just it's kind of funny. I don't know if this is really like along the topic, but what had happened at the time was I had this long-term boyfriend, and on Valentine's Day, I lost my job at this place I was working. It was a Fortune 500 company I was working for. They had to, and it was after 9/11. And so they were like getting rid of a whole bunch of people. So I was one of that group of people that got laid off. Valentine's
Okay.
Day, yeah, have
The
dinner with
Valentine's
this
Day
guy.
massacre.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, that's just the crappiest day for anybody to know. Well, I guess no, the crappiest day would be like, right before Christmas, or
Oh, sure.
something like that, right? But anyway, but yeah, so let go, come home, thinking, oh, well, I'm at least going to have a nice dinner with my boyfriend. And then we end up getting into this long discussion and we end up breaking up. It was like
Oh,
awful.
geez.
It was like the worst.
Wow.
And I've never liked Valentine's Day to begin with. And now I had a real reason why I didn't really
All
like it.
right.
Right? So after that, I was like, I literally every day would cry for some reason or another. And then I was like, all right, something's got to give, right? So that's when I found a therapist, and I went to therapy for like a good year or so, and just realized all the patterns I was doing, and reasons for those patterns, and tools I could use to like stop myself when I was thinking a certain way, and all the stuff. And the hardest part about it was that I ended up having to rethink other relationships I was in, just with friends even. and
Mm-hmm.
having to kind of like get rid of them. And that's what I
Well,
mean when when you really are in tune with like making sure that you are going in a direction that's good for you in your life. Sometimes that means letting other people go. And I think that's so hard. It was hard for me.
yeah.
So I don't ever like take that lightly, but I think that could be a large reason why people wouldn't go down that path.
Right, right. Because you do have to make sacrifices. And when I use the word sacrifice, it's kind of exactly what you're saying. Like, what is it that you are willing to give up to reach that higher level? And maybe it's giving up watching so much TV, or it's giving up the friends who are engaging in habits that don't serve you. Whatever it is, yeah. And it could be
Yes.
really difficult, especially when it's friends and family that you maybe need to spend a little less time with because they don't want you to change. It
Right?
reflects on them, and they
Yes.
don't, and then it makes them uncomfortable. And yeah, so that's
Yes.
such a good point as to why it's so important to get around people who do support where you're going and what you're doing. And oftentimes it's not a friend. That's why you may need a counselor or a therapist or a coach, depending on what you're doing,
Exactly.
to help you
Oh,
get there.
I'm a big believer in that now. I mean, I think that was actually one of those moments where I was like, when I went to therapy, I was like, having those feelings again about what would my family think? And man, they would be like, don't tell anybody. And all of a sudden here I am telling y'all, I'm like, I don't care. Cause like, it's so important. I feel like everyone should go through therapy at some point in their lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
There's
know?
certainly no shame in it.
No.
If you need,
I
if you
mean,
need the help, go get it.
if you need
It's
the help, why
available
wouldn't you
out
go get
there.
it? Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So, okay. So you were in being a CPA, doing your thing until, was that letting that, getting laid off from that job, was that your turning point? Was that,
No,
no?
no, not at all. I wasn't even like, here's what's funny about the whole thing. Like, I think back on the whole career of being a CPA, and being in that field. There was a couple of things. One, every time I'd get into a job, at first I liked it. It was challenging. I was learning something new because I've been in a fair amount. I say a fair amount, but like let's say a little more than a handful of jobs over that time frame, right? And I liked learning. I liked like the challenge of something new, the new environment, the new people, the new process. Like a new type of company. I was never in the same kind of company. I would always go to something different. So that was really fun. But what I realized after a time was I didn't like after I got to know what they were doing, I didn't like the routine of it. Like I was just like, okay, I've learned it. I don't need to do this anymore. Like,
Yeah.
I don't, yeah. So that, it was funny because there for a while, I was like almost every 4 years, I would be like,
Like
maybe I
clockwork.
just need to go somewhere else. And then the funny thing too was that I also realized something really interesting. This again is a look back, right? That the people around, I was always surrounded by these really smart people. Like, I can name, like I can even name them right now in my mind. Like they were so smart and they were so into it, like what they were doing at this company.
Yeah.
And I was always jealous of that because I was like, I'm not that smart. And the truth is, yeah, I'm a smart person.
Uh-huh.
My talents do not, but I don't want to be the smart that they are. They are the smart when it
Right.
comes to accounting rules and regulations. And, in the case of when I was working for AES, the electrical, distribution and generation, and they knew all this stuff. And I was like, I'm just not interested in that. But I always took
Right.
that to be, I'm just not smart enough. And now I know, looking
Interesting.
back, that that's not the case. That wasn't the place I was supposed to be in the first place. So,
Right, right. You
well,
weren't
supposed to
interested
be, I
because it
know.
wasn't your, right, but you weren't interested because that wasn't your area of interest. That wasn't where you could excel.
Exactly. So I just that's kind of one of those things where I just kept thinking, well, if I just go to a different place, maybe it'll work. And I do remember, just this is really,
If I
oh, go ahead.
just, that
If I
term.
just, yeah, don't you hate
Eh,
that?
Yeah.
Yes. And I think at one point I realized that, and I'm not sure exactly where it happened, but I do remember I was at this one company. It was a television production and post-production company. And, stuff was happening that I wasn't appreciative of, just the way the management was. And what ended up happening was I started to look for other jobs. I still really loved photography. And I thought, well, okay, I clearly don't want to work here anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And, maybe I'll go to photography school. So,
Okay.
and then maybe I can, once I like learn a lot more about it, maybe then I can, develop a business around it. So I did, and I went and got a certificate in professional photography. And I did find another job, but the job was different. I was still doing accounting, but now I was in a sort of a consultative space rather than working
Okay.
directly, like rather than like producing, financial statements or things like that for a company. I was in consultative, space where I wasn't, responsible for that level, or, I was just helping a client. Like, let me
Mm-hmm.
just get in here and there and help you out. And I was like, that's fine.
Right.
And that changed too. That was actually satisfying that need to not have to do the same thing over and over again. So
Yeah.
in that respect, I think that was great. But yeah, I got that certificate, and then I started a business, but I still was like that excuse of, well, I still need to get to this level before I'm able to like really go for it. So
Yeah.
all of that photography business stuff was literally a weekends and nights,
Hmm.
and never really, like, there was always something that needed to happen before I could before I could quit. And I don't
So,
even know
what
that I
was
was
the
even ready to
thing
quit
that
at that point.
actually happened that made you take the leap to doing photography full time?
Well, here's the thing. I'm going to tell you just a few of those excuses, and then I'm going to tell you what really made me
Okay.
do that.
All right.
So the excuses range from, at first it was, I'm not a good enough photographer yet. So I just need more clients. So, you know, I really felt like I needed to be, I looked up to people who were in the newborn photography space. So there's
Mm-hmm.
Julia Kelleher and Anna Brandt and those people. And I would be like watching what they did, and I would be like, oh yeah, like they know how to wrap those babies so well, and I'm just not good enough at that. And see, like when I do that wrap, it just pops out and it's not good enough. And
Mm.
and I just was such a perfectionist around that stuff. And what I slowly over time realized, that my clients were like, this is amazing, because they're not looking at the
Mm.
little thing they don't care about that,
Right. They have
but
nothing to
like,
compare it to.
no, they're
Yeah.
looking at their beautiful baby and going, I'm so in love with this photo. So
Uh
that
huh.
over time I got over that. And
Okay.
then we were renovating our house. So I was like, well, I can't quit now. We got like hundreds of thousands of dollars going into renovating I mean, literally,
Yeah.
we built a whole new garage. We renovated the entire basement. We made that into a rental space, all of it. And I was like,
Yep.
yeah, I can't do that. And then it was, oh yeah, we're having a baby. Oh no.
Your own baby. Uh huh.
Yes. And I'm like, I can't do that now. It was just one thing after
There's
another.
always, yeah, there's never the
And
perfect time.
no, there isn't. And I think the thing is that looking back on that stuff, no, it wouldn't have been a good time for me to quit. That would just been kind of dumb.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
what I did do over time was, we were saving money. And then and things got really like, what is the word? Very comfortable at work. I wasn't being
Yeah.
challenged. I could do that job in my sleep. I had
Everything
awesome
was
people
fine.
working for me. Everything was fine. Like, why do I? Yes. Why should I quit? Like, this
Uh
is
huh.
easy money, right?
Yeah.
And then my boss comes to me one day and he goes, well, I'm going to promote you to project manager, and you're going to go over there and work at, is it okay for me to say it's a government agency? Should I not do that?
Sure.
Okay.
It's
You're
up
going
to
to
you.
go over and work at that place, this other government agency, right? And don't worry, because you'll have every Friday off, so you can work on your business. That's what he told me. And you're only going to
Okay.
have like, you don't have to have, it's not a full-time job, it's going to be like a 30-hour, 32-hour a week thing. And I believed him, and he was wrong.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I go in
Okay.
there, And I got like a skeleton crew because my company wasn't able to hire the people they needed to fill the spots in time because
Oh,
a couple of
geez.
things happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got the contract late, and so we
Mm-hmm.
only had like a month between contractors, so we had a month to learn everything from the previous contractor, and we had like no staff, and everything they did was super manual. And all of a sudden, I found myself not as the project manager. I was the project manager, the manager over one of the sections, and a doer. And it was
Yeah.
ridiculous. And it was ridiculous. And then, of course, I had like, I don't know, every possible employee, like bad seed that you could have
Yeah.
all at once.
Okay.
Right? So
Right. That could be a book in
constant.
itself. Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, like you wouldn't even believe the stuff that happened. Can I say one really quick story that I thought was hilarious? This one
Sure.
guy, yes, please, this is funny. So I just think, oh my God, it's so ridiculous. We were there very late and we ordered dinner and we ordered hamburgers and a hamburger was missing. And this one guy who was like so, I don't know, so selfish. He grabbed someone else's hamburger and ate it before they could even say it. Like he ran away and ate it. And
Wow.
then they were going, "Where's my burger?" And everybody's like, "Well, I don't know." And they're like, "Oh, that guy ate it." Like, what?
Wow.
So it was like
That's
this
like
kind of environment. Dog eat
That's
dog.
crazy. Like, yeah,
Hamburger eat
literally
hamburger.
burger eaters. Yeah.
Yes.
Stealing burgers from each other. Wow. That's some
Yes.
kind of teamwork.
Right. And so then the moment came where the section leader of this one section that I was helping out, it was probably 10:30 at night, I don't know, and she came over and she was standing right behind me and she was saying, "Well, you said you'd have this done at this time and it's not done and we need it and I need it now. And when will you have this thing?" And just literally like just peppering me with this stuff. And I had that moment where I don't know, my blood pressure was going crazy.
Yeah.
I was exhausted. I I didn't know if I was going to like just quit right there on the spot or
Uh-huh.
punch her in the face. I literally didn't know. I
What?
never punched
Either
anyone.
or. Either or.
Yeah, right. And I've never ever like punched anyone, but I literally came very close that night. And that's when her boss came down and said, "Okay, time to like go back to your office," talking to her. And then, she was just like, "It's okay, Melissa, like everything's going to be okay." So that was the environment I was in. And I think I just got to that point. I was only there for 6 months. And
Yeah.
that's
Wow.
when I was
But it
like,
probably seemed like 6 years or maybe 60
it seemed
years.
so long. And I was getting home sometimes at 3 in the morning. And then
Wow.
expected to be back in the office the next morning by like 9:30 or 10. I mean, there was
Yeah. 'Cause who
no
needs
rest.
sleep? Yeah.
Right. It was crazy. And I think what had happened was I met someone that I know from school, from my daughter's school rather, and he and I walked to the metro together that morning after one of those really late nights. And he looked at me, he goes, "You look terrible." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, thanks.
Thanks.
Appreciate it." Yeah. And then we started talking and then he goes, he's like, you say you've got some money saved. He goes, "You got a studio, you have a business, you have clients. Why don't you just quit?" And I was like, it was like a moment of where I was like, okay, that's scary, but it's also at the same time felt so like a huge relief. I suddenly felt like, God, wouldn't
Yeah.
that be wonderful? And
Right.
then
Like
I
you
got
hadn't
to,
thought of that idea until somebody
no.
else pointed it out to you, pointed out the obvious.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's still during this whole thing, I was like, there's no way I can quit. I mean, my God, like,
Yeah.
I have to bring money in. I have to, I have to support my family. I have to.
Yeah.
So I got to work, not to the office, but at the other end of the metro where I was going. And I just sat down and yeah, I called my husband and I was like, well, hey, what do you think of what, our friend said? And he goes, yeah, why don't you quit? I need you home. Like, you're never home.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was like, you sure you're okay with that? And he's like, yeah. So that was what it took. And
Okay.
yeah. And I did.
How long ago was that?
Oh my gosh, that was January of 2018.
Okay. So just
So
a
3
few
years
years
ago.
ago. And life now, would you describe it as fantastic?
Can I describe it? Sure. Well, it doesn't feel as like high stress as as it did
Yeah.
before. There are different stresses, right? Because
Yeah,
being
well,
a business
sure.
owner is not, it's not like a walk in the park, but the difference is that it feels in alignment with
Yeah.
who I am. Like it's
That
literally,
that is the key.
yes,
Yeah, that it's
that's
not
it.
about not having stress and not having necessarily days that are all, sunshine and roses,
Yes,
because that's not life. At the same
right.
time, the stresses are different. The overall experience is different because you are fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
Your soul is fulfilled at the
Mm-hmm.
core. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I really got into it and I realized, because I did change my niche like right after I quit, which probably wasn't the smartest thing to do, but what I realized at that moment when I did change it, I go, oh my gosh, this lights me up. I could
Mm.
talk about this every day. And sometimes I do. And then my husband's like, I'm tired of hearing about it. But like, but that's how I knew. It was like, oh, remember all those years ago when you thought those people were so smart? Like, and you weren't? The thing is, they don't know jack about what
Right.
you're doing, right? So,
Right.
I
And
am smart. I'm
yeah.
just smart in this, not in that, right?
Right. And this that you're doing would not light them up.
Not at
They would
all.
feel not smart
No.
and they wouldn't. Yeah. I mean, it's that goes back to that whole thing of if you expect a fish to climb a tree, what's that? I don't even, I totally messed that
Yeah.
up. It was something about,
No, but
yeah, if
I can
you
totally get
expect a
it.
fish to ride a bicycle and you would never,
Yes.
yeah,
You'd
climb a
never see
tree, ride a
one.
bicycle, whatever it is,
Wouldn't
not do its
happen.
own thing. It would,
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it's about
So,
finding
I mean,
what is your thing.
yeah, and yeah, I think, um, there's still, and the funny thing is like, just because I had that self discovery moment and I took action on it,
Hmm.
um, there's still been a whole slew of more discovery moments since then. So
Sure.
it's just like,
Sure.
even more, like, I really do think that I've said this to other entrepreneurs. I know you and I have talked about it, but it's like being an entrepreneur is like the biggest self discovery thing you could probably do.
Yeah,
I can't think of
it
something
is.
else that's, because you're forced to now.
Right.
You know?
But not forced in a way like somebody like that woman standing over you going, "When are you going
No,
to be finished?" It's
no,
it's forced in that it's continuous growth,
yes,
but it's exciting. It's you
yes,
want to do it because you want to get to the
yes,
next level and you want to be better at this is the thing. You want to be better at it because you're excited about what you're doing, not because someone
right,
else
and
expects you and wants you to do it.
that's the key, right? It's like if you don't have the
Yeah.
passion for the thing that you're doing, then all the growth stuff that you need to do to get there isn't fun. So I think that's how you
Right.
know, right? And I
Yeah.
do think, like,
Yeah.
people say most, well, I don't know if there's people I'm sure that start a business just to make money, right? Like
Sure. Sure.
that's what they want to do, and many of them are successful. I would have to wonder whether they're happy, whether
Right.
they're
Because that's a
fulfilled.
different thing. Even if you are making money, that doesn't mean you're happy and fulfilled. And the two
No,
are not mutually exclusive. It's not like, well, in order to be happy and fulfilled, you have to sacrifice making money. Not saying that at all.
no,
Yeah.
no, no.
It's
But it's like, but going into it with, and I think for me that was kind of the key thing, right? Because I was so focused on, oh, we don't have enough money, right? That scarcity thing kept coming up for me all the time.
yeah.
And so that's why for me that leap was huge. Like it was
Yeah. Yeah, a leap
freaking
of faith
scary.
and trust that you could make money doing the thing you love.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, I think that because I think back on it and I think, wow, like that was an amazing thing, and it was so scary and all the things, and then people have told me, and that means that you were, brave. Like, it was a brave thing
Yes.
to do. And I thought
Yes.
to myself, how funny, because honestly, at that time, I thought there was no other choice.
Right.
You see?
Right.
And I was like, I'm
Yeah.
not sure if that's brave or not. And they said, yup, it's brave. And I'm like, okay.
I agree. I've had that feeling where you feel like, well, I don't see how that was brave, but you at the same time feel like I had to jump.
Had to.
But
yeah,
taking that leap, there is an element of bravery and courage there as well. So kudos for doing it.
You know what it is? It's like standing at the edge of a cliff and you got a wolf on one side and like a deep ravine on the other. Which is more, I'll go ahead and jump. Thanks.
Yeah.
I'll just go ahead and jump and see what's going to catch me.
And trust. Because really it does always work out.
It does.
If you have that, it does. Even though you just don't know how, but it always does. So before we end.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say one last thing on that thing. It's like that, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
Nothing ever stays the same. And so it's going to change, right? I mean, there's that. If you know that that's true, then you have to just lean into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything always works out in the end. And if it's not all worked out, it's not the end.
That's right. I like that.
Yeah. So before we end, I got to ask you about your hype song, walk-up song. It's got all different kinds of terms to what it's called. But the song that you listen to when you need extra energy, you want to get pumped up and get hyped up.
Oh, yes. Okay. So,
yes,
I'm glad that you told me that this would be a question, because if I were just standing here, I wouldn't have thought of it. So just briefly, my daughter is, into all kinds of different music, but she's got her pulse on what's, new and happening all the time. And so like I guess it must've been a couple of years ago, she introduced me to Meghan Trainor. And, at first I was like, man, what is this stuff? And then I started listening to her and I thought, man, this chick is awesome, because she's just really empowering. And so I think the song that I would pick would be that song, Me Too. And it's like, if I were you, I'd want to be me too. And the reason that I like it is not just the beat and all of the energy that you get out of it, because you do. Like, you can't not dance to that song. It's just not. It's physically impossible. You can't sit still. Exactly. I think the other thing too is that she's so kind of self-deprecating, and I totally she'd be somebody that I'd want to be friends with. Totally.
Yeah.
I watch her. And
she would be hilarious.
She would be hilarious. And that song in particular I think it's meant to be somewhat like tongue in cheek, but really also like, hey, all of you should feel that way.
Right. About your own life.
Have that.
About your own life. Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. I love that.
So that's why.
Good point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I listened to it before I got on here today.
Oh, cool. Excellent.
Yes,
we're gonna put a link in the show notes to the song so people can find it and listen to it. And how can people, if they wanted to continue the conversation with you about what you did and what you're doing now, where's the best place for them to find you?
Oh, wow. Well, I guess they could just, send me an email. I mean, let's do old school, right?
Okay.
Definitely send me an email. Or like, I don't know, where would you suggest, Lori? What would be a good place?
What's your website?
Oh, well, my website is melissademple.com. So that's pretty easy. And there is a contact form on that, but you can also email me at melissa@melissademple.com.
Okay, perfect. We'll put a link in the show notes for that too.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on Fine is a Four-Letter Word.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right. So it is.